John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, episode 16, addresses agape love. And he devotes a whole hour to that one concept, which indicates its importance. So it's important because we remain embedded in the enduring legacy of Christianity. So that concept has shaped us. But on a micro level, let's just say it's very, very important as well. In fact, it's critical to each of us and how it affects us in every relationship, including the relationship we have with ourselves. So he's a psychologist. John is a psychologist, and his description of agape is very parallel to attachment theory, which I don't know if that's on purpose. I imagine it is. So I'm going to go a little bit more into that and then sort of relate it to the metaphysics of quality to some extent.
We talked about the Greeks have three terms, and it's helpful because by this time the New Testament is being written in Greek. It's helpful to understand these Greek terms. So there's eros, which is the love of being one with something, right? And it can be just, drinking water, so I become one with it. But of course it could become what has become more commonly known as becoming one with someone through sexual union, erotic love. Then there's philia, that's at the core of philosophia. This is the love that is born out of, cooperation. So eros is consumptive, making one with. Philia is cooperation. We work together. And a lot of how we succeed as human beings is the way we work together. But Jesus starts to emphasize a new kind of love, agape. And this is not the love of consumption or cooperation. This is the love of creation. It's the love that God is demonstrating towards humanity in the way God is an ongoing creation of the open future. So God is creating the future. He's creating the historical process and course of that history that makes people possible. See, agape is the kind of love that creates persons. So the main metaphor for agape, if you remember, is the way a parent loves a child. You don't love a child because you want to consume it in some way. That's hideous and vicious. You don't love your child when you bring it home from the hospital because it's a great friend to you, it can cooperate. It can't do that at all. In fact, it's not even a person. It's not a morally, rationally reflective agent. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. You love it precisely because by loving that non-person, you turn it into a person.
Let me read this description of attachment theory. It's brief and it's succinct, and it's from Psychology Today. So what is attachment? The emotional bond that typically forms between infant and caregiver is the means by which the helpless infant gets primary needs met. It then becomes the engine of subsequent social, emotional, and cognitive development. So that's an important concept if you've looked at 16. The early experience of the infant stimulates growth of neural pathways that will sculpt enduring patterns of response to many people, life events, and things in general. The attachment experience affects personality development, particularly a sense of security, and research shows that it influences the ability to form stable relationships throughout life. Okay, so that's the first part. I'm going to read the second part in a bit.
For a very long time, we are born out of, we are the receivers of agape. It is only because you as an animal, because that's what you are before you're a person, a biological animal, it's only because you as an animal received the agapic love of others that you were actually transformed into a person.
So yes, what he says here is so true, and remember, in the description of attachment, the neural pathways are sculpted by our early interactions with our caregivers, with our parents, and how we're treated by them. Plus, there are some videos you see in psychology classes of Romanian orphans, and Jordan Peterson has referred to this, who, while they are fed and clothed and have shelter, they've never received any touch or nurturing, and they sort of have this lifeless, unengaged, blank stare. It's heartbreaking. The first time you see this, it's just really, really upsetting. If I find it, I'll link to it in the description below. And very frequently, and in fact, I think most of the time, these babies die because you can't develop without love, without agape, the agape that John's referring to in here. So when John says it creates you, it really does. So these videos demonstrate what happens when the little creature, the animal that we come out as, who comes into the world with all the potential to be a human, and this potential is denied.
It's because of agape, because of the way other people have devoted themselves and participated in you, that you went from a non-person into a person, that you got the ability. It's almost like other people are mirrors through which you come to see and realize yourself, that you got a sense of self, that you got the ability to reflect on yourself, that you got a sense of your own ownership.
Okay, so the term reflection, in the interaction between a baby and a mother, there is a term called mirroring, which describes the attunement between the mother and the child. So good attunement means that the mother not attends to the baby. Remember the Romanian orphans, they get attended to, but what they lacked was the mirroring, meaning that the mother is reflecting back to the baby what the baby is trying to express and helps her along so that those expressions can find a place in the world, so they can find a context, and so the child can join the world. The mother also provides responses, mirroring responses to distress and to excitement, and normalizes those with soothing. So this is where the ability to regulate emotion, to handle negative emotion and overstimulation comes from. And in this mirroring, emotions learn to be taken in stride. They don't whip you up and down.
In this sense, our relationship to our parents, and please listen to this very carefully, is in that sense erotic, right? In the sense that we are consuming them. We are internalizing them. We are becoming one with them. There's nothing that, in fact, is more transformative for an adult than having a child.
There is a great psychologist in the middle of the century named DW Winnicott, who devoted his life to understanding the psychology of children, and who was one of the first attachment theorists, and that's what he's really known for. And so he said that the mother and the baby are a dyad, that they are, they consume each other. This eros is necessary at the very beginning of life. Of course, later it's not the ideal way, but this eros with the agape is how you begin life.
So from the child's perspective, what's happening is, right, they are, in a sense, consuming the love that the adult is giving them. They're taking in this love and they are becoming one with it. You understand yourself and can reflect on yourself because of the way you have internalized other people's attention on you. And what you actually do, right, is you internalize other people and how they are aware of you. And that is how you gain your reflective rationality. That is how you gain your own understanding. You fundamentally gain your self-understanding, your sense of self, and your ability to reflect on yourself by how you are reflected through other people.
So here's the second part of the definition I want to read because it relates to what John says here. Neuroscientists believe that attachment is such a primal need that there are networks of neurons in the brain dedicated to setting in motion a hormone, oxytocin, to foster the process. The genius of the attachment system is that it provides the infant's first coping system. It sets up in the infant's mind a mental representation of the caregiver, like John said, one that is wholly portable and can be summoned up as a comforting mental presence in difficult moments, because it allows an infant to separate from the caregiver without distress and begin to explore the world around her. Attachment contains within it the platform for the child's ability to survive independently. So internalizing people is very much what actually happens with your parents. The superego in Freud is basically your parents. And if you have this internal voice telling you you're okay, you are loved unconditionally, then you can be in the world and you can take it. You can take the downs and you can feel like you deserve the ups.
From the parent's perspective, the person giving agape, it is not egocentric at all. In fact, there is nothing that will more challenge your egocentric orientation, that everything is moving this way, than having a child. If you're a good parent, and of course we all vary in how good we are as parents. I have been privileged to be a parent myself. But what happens is, you are no longer the center of your salience landscape. The child is. Because the child is absolutely dependent upon you.
So hopefully the parent giving agape has sacrificed some of his own egoic needs to care for and attend to the child. But unfortunately, this isn't always the case. As we know, they're terrible cases of child abuse by parents. But let's look at two less potent forms of attachment dysfunction that go with the other two kinds of love, that go with eros and philia. So eros, when a parent is smothering or coddling, one result you might get is that unfortunately kids don't mature properly. They each get a trophy. They need safe spaces. They grew up constantly monitored by helicopter parents. And they're mental health professionals that say that this is somewhat of a mental health crisis right now. Jonathan Haidt certainly addresses this at length. That's a lot of his work is around this, the result of eros instead of agape. So children raised with philia, you know, parents who want kind of a helper or a pal or a peer, a helper is often the case. The parents don't want the responsibility of children. They want some kind of collaborator in whatever their agenda is. And these parents teach their children that the parents often teach these children that the children are expected to meet their emotional needs, the parents' emotional needs. And often these children are neglected and expected to care for themselves and possibly younger siblings, as parents don't want the responsibility. So parents who predominate with philia rather than agape are more likely to be neglecting. Ironically, so kids who are raised like this, there are two things that can happen. Well, there's many things that can happen. One thing is that the kid can be very reliant on the environment, and their sense of self will come from how the environment and how other people react to them. And the other thing that can happen is narcissism, because if a child is neglected, they have to do their own nurturing, and they can become narcissistically preoccupied, self-absorbed. So one of the main problems, I think, in therapy is not enough agape. I think that's one of the main reasons people go to therapy.
But agape has a sacrificial element to it in that you give yourself, you forgive, you give before the person earns. It's not philia. It is not reciprocity. It is not you and I are working together. You have earned my trust and love. Philia is great and it's important, right? And it's not eros. I love you because of how I can consume you and, right, make you one with me. No, agape has a sacrificial component to it, because what I'm actually doing, right, is I'm giving up. I'm making myself an affordance for your transformation from non-person into person.
Children raised with agape develop a capacity to regulate emotion and to engage in the world and enjoy relationships. Parents who put aside their egoic concerns and make an affordance for their children allow them to grow along their natural trajectory. This agapic love is critical for the development of the true self. This is another DW Winnicott concept. And it is given by the parent who participates in the creation of the whole person, of the true self. Children raised with agapic love primarily are neither their parents' pets nor their pals, like the other cases we were looking at. They are their true selves. And the technical term for this state of affairs is secure attachment.
We experience agape from God, the degree to which we give it to others. And this has been, of course, radically trivialized in our culture. Right? We think of forgiveness largely as a matter of, somebody feels sorry and we tell them it's okay. That's not the core idea of forgiveness. The core idea of forgiveness doesn't depend on your contrition. The degree to which you are trying to afford someone else growing into their personhood, and the degree to which you are making a sacrifice towards that, is already forgiveness. Some forgiveness is when somebody has slighted us and the relationship has been damaged and we have to act agapically in order to reestablish the relationship. But in a very real sense, all agapic love is forgiving love because it is giving before, right, the person that is receiving the love can in any way be said to have earned it.
So this clip is sort of an illustration of how to implement agape, the relationship between how you give agape as well. And I'm including this clip to emphasize why to have an early experience of this type of love is so critical. It is the lens in which you participate in the world. To give it freely without egoic demand comes from a place of security within yourself that you know agape deeply, that you have experienced this. And when John says this type of forgiveness or expression of agape is radically trivialized, it's because we consider this in our society in a way to be passivity, weakness. And this is a time where the message is to demand and insist upon. And also, as he mentions in this video, there's a thinking that is endemic to our rugged Western individualism, which is you don't need anyone, you can do this yourself, which is, bullshit. The opposite of this attitude is forgiveness, which is a participating in a relationship and allowing that relationship to emerge and unfold on its own terms. So do you see this is very much related to metaphysics of quality? Forgive, to give before. It's like Poincaré.
How do we tap into all of this? The power of agape, acknowledging its reality, the participatory gnosis, the radical transformation, our own sense of not living up to the fullness of our personhood. What if we still experience all of that, but we do not have the machinery of Christianity with its metaphysics of cosmic redemption available to us? That could be a powerful experience of despair. I mean, Camus famously said, "My whole of my life, I've tried to figure out how can I be a saint without there being a God." In ours, it's this powerful, whole new way of being. And it has become so sedimented in our culture and so ossified and so below how we live. It's like the ground we're walking on. And like the ground we walk on, we have contempt for it without realizing how much it holds everything up.
As John says, and will illustrate, there is something that is at the very foundation of who we are. And because it's foundational, we dismiss it. We dismiss and disregard this key aspect of our our culture, of the Christian culture we remain embedded in, and yet it's exactly what we need to grow as individuals and as a society. And neuroscience proves this on the individual level, but it was articulated 2,000 years ago. It is the archetype of love in our collective unconscious. It has created us, and we keep ourselves ignorant or dismissive of agape at our own psychological peril. So here's Corinthians 4.8. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And now faith, hope, and love abide, and the greatest of these is love. So this is read at almost every American wedding, but maybe it should be read at every christening, or even in the delivery room. So how does this figure into the Piercett Project? Like I mentioned a little earlier, being in the state of agape is the subliminal self that is ready to attach to quality. And it's that part of ourselves that allows the child to emerge rather than to impose upon the child. Remember, dynamic quality is a creative force. This agape allows two people to engage in a dynamic, creative relationship. So I hope that made sense, and I will see you next time.
To use a Christian word, the grace. That's what grace originally means. The gifts that Christianity has given us. It has given us expectations of love and transformation and growth into personhood and relief from inner conflict.